This presentation is on our website. The website is azospb.gov. It's also on the governor's website. So this entire presentation is already there. And before we get too far, I'm going to introduce the team I have here. My name is Bill Greeny. I'm with the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. Zach Harris, he's a budget analyst in our office. Alec Yulano, he's also an analyst in our office. We're going to let them talk a little bit too, because this is mostly a script that talks over a series of slides. You get tired of listening to the same voice, right? So we're going to break it up a little bit. If you have questions, we'll do whatever questions you have at the end, but let us get through the script first, and then we'll discuss whatever it is it's on your mind. So we'll get started. The approach that Governor Ducey takes is about growing economic opportunity for all. He refers to it as the American way. And it comes from a clear mandate that government should work at the speed of business to decide faster, respond faster, resolve faster, and to add more services online and to keep tax burdens at a minimum. Now, before you get too settled in, we're going to do a video. This was actually prepared by a professional group of communications people for the governor, so we have to pay attention. It's faster than I am.
Seen nothing yet.
Arizona is a growth leader in its own right, thanks to a booming economy assisted by the business-friendly tax and regulatory climate and a thrilling startup environment. As we saw last year, since recovery from the recession and the national economic growth, the state revenue growth has picked up dramatically. While this trend was reflected in the real GDP growth, it is even more pronounced in certain sectors. Consumer confidence is up 10%, or up to a 10-year high. The unemployment rate is at 50-year lows, and the manufacturing sector is the strongest it has been since 1980. While early indications in Arizona show this trend continuing, some of the data suggests a slowdown in national economic performance. An acceleration in U.S. manufacturing output and employment led the economic surge over the last 18 months. On the other hand, this sector has led the current slowdown. Similarly, real GDP growth in the first 3 quarters of 2019 was closer to the post-recession average than it was during the 2017 to 2018 trend. Considering these facts together, the executive anticipates the current economic expansion is likely to continue, but at a more normal trend of 2 to 2.5%. Arizona's core strength isn't limited to just its manufacturing sector, though. While we had the second strongest manufacturing job growth in the country last year, we were also the number one state for domestic in-migration and third in the country for construction job growth. Arizona also captures nearly a tenth of national in-migration during the last year, we're only about 2% of the country's population. Since 2015, Arizona has added over 350,000 new jobs, and more than 300 people per day are moving to Arizona. Considered collectively, the state appears positioned to capture an outsized share of national economic growth thanks to its core demographic trends. Recall that in recent years, a great deal of discussion centered on when or whether general fund growth would return to its slower long-run trends. Based on data through November, it does not look like 2020 will be that year. Year to date, the general fund is up more than 9%. That's $261 million above levels that were contemplated when the fiscal 2020 budget was enacted. When the governor was elected in 2014, he pledged to reduce income taxes every year that he was in office. He has kept that promise, and in the partnership with the feds, last year enacted the largest combined state and federal income tax cuts in a generation. Since then, state and national growth has surged. Arizona has the 14th lowest state and local tax burden in the United States, while we have the third highest economic momentum ranking. The governor wants to keep that momentum going. The fiscal 2021 executive budget includes his largest income tax reduction yet by eliminating all state income tax on military pension income in Arizona. In recognition of the 20 years plus service, this reform will save our state's veterans more than $45 million a year, or about $840 per pensioner. Between fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 21, the governor has restrained total spending growth to well below levels of the mid-2000s. In more recent years, total spending has risen as rising revenues have increased, allowing the state to make needed investments like K-12 and doing it without tax increases. The fiscal 2021 budget continues this practice, growing total spending by just 3.5% next year to about $12.3 billion, while still meeting all of our prior and new commitments and providing that we can both be fiscally responsible and meeting the state's funding needs. After just 3 years of structural balance in the mid-2000s, the state entered a period of imbalance during the recession. Since then, thanks to 5 consecutively fiscally cautious budgets, the state has enjoyed its longest run of structural surpluses since 2000. As you can see in the table, the fiscal 21 executive budget continues to honor the governor's commitment to being structurally balanced every year without exception, thanks to a $250 million structural surplus projected next year and a nearly $200 million surplus at the end of the 3-year outlook. From 1982 until 2002, general fund revenue growth followed a remarkably stable trend of approximately 3.5% annual growth. Revenues departed dramatically from this trend from 2002 through 2007, and spending followed suit, creating a massive and unstable fiscal bubble going into the Great Recession. Since then, revenues have again followed a fairly stable trend until about mid-2017. Growth since has surged. This budget really focuses on using those resources responsibly and not repeating past fiscal mistakes. In 2020, the rainy day fund balance hit approximately 8% of annual general fund spending. It brought the balance to over $1 billion. This was a major achievement for the state, as credit rating agencies and other national financial analysts suggest saving approximately 10% of general fund revenues for times of economic hardship should be the goal. Without this needed investment, Arizona risked again being insufficiently prepared for the next downturn. To continue securing Arizona's fiscal future, the executive budget includes another $25 million deposit in fiscal 21, which will bring our rainy day fund balance to almost 9% of general fund revenues. Turning towards the current fiscal year, sometimes expectations don't align with reality, and supplemental funding is required. The executive provides $65 million in general fund funding for the agencies in the table. Their needs are exceeding what we had planned last spring. $35 million of this supplemental funding is dedicated to the School Facilities Board to fund an increase in building renewal projects this year. The executive wants to ensure that the board has all the resources it needs to maintain our schools when they need it. Additionally, the executive budget provides $10 million in one-time supplemental funding to agencies from other state funds beyond what is listed here. The executive budget is consistent with the governor's philosophy: structurally balanced and avoid mistakes of the past. The executive baseline anticipates cash reserves of approximately $965 million. When we talk about funding issues, there's baseline and there's governor's initiatives. A lot of companies will call baseline, they'll refer to it as a continuation budget. What would it cost us to do next year what we did this year without any changes in direction or policy? So we have $965 million available if we just assume that. Of that amount, $764 million is being dedicated to new initiative spending. Of that $764 million, nearly 2/3 of the initiatives are one-time in nature, keeping consistent with our philosophy of avoiding mistakes from the past. The executive budget heavily prioritizes spending on K-12, higher education, roads, and infrastructure. 58% of the executive expenditures are dedicated to K-12 and higher education. After baseline funding, 64% of the total budget is dedicated to education. Beyond that, the executive makes needed targeted investments in public safety, infrastructure, and other areas. The executive budget continues the governor's commitment to provide sustainable increases to K-12 and higher education without raising taxes. Over the period of 2015 through 2020, the governor increased investment in K-12 by $4.5 billion during that period, and that number increases to $6.6 billion with the fiscal year 2021 budget proposal. This focus on education isn't limited to K-12, but includes workforce development and alignment efforts at the post-secondary level with targeted investments to prepare Arizona to compete in the next generation economy. The executive budget includes $608 million in new K-12 investments, including $145 million for enrollment growth, inflation, and other technical adjustments. This budget continues Governor Ducey's commitment to fund K-12 education above and beyond enrollment and inflationary adjustments by providing an additional $463 million for initiatives that address teacher, student, and classroom needs. The executive continues to prioritize spending in our K-12 schools by increasing per pupil spending amounts since 2015. Per pupil spending is projected to exceed pre-recession levels in 2022 and keep growing in 2023 and beyond. The executive budget also includes $103 million in new funding for investments in higher education at Arizona's public universities and community colleges. These investments enhance Arizona's efforts to align higher education with critical workforce development needs. The executive budget delivers on a $1 billion promise to provide more resources to Arizona's public K-12 education system by finalizing the implementation of the 20 by 2020 plan and restoring the additional assistance formula to public schools. The 2021 executive budget includes $204 million to restore additional assistance funding to schools 2 years ahead of schedule. This flexible funding can be used for expenditures such as textbooks, curriculum, technology, and some capital. In addition, the executive provides the third installment of the 20 by 20 plan to raise teacher pay by 20% in school year 2020 to 2021, bringing the total investment in Arizona's teachers to $645 million. The fiscal 2020 enacted appropriations included $32 million in school safety funding to support the cost of placing school resource officers, school counselors, and social workers on campus to help promote safe learning environments. This past fall, schools submitted grant requests totaling nearly $97 million, more than 3 times the available funding for this program. The executive recognizes the critical need to invest more in school safety and provides an additional $38 million to fund all remaining requests so that every school who submitted a complete application can hire their first choices for school safety personnel. The executive proposal more than doubles the amount of funding for the school safety grant program and will provide an estimated 162 school counselors, 155 social workers, and 144 school resource officers for schools in need. The executive includes $44 million for Project Rocket. This is a 3-year pilot program to help close the achievement gap in Arizona's public schools. In fiscal year 2016, a school turnaround pilot project at the Avondale Elementary School District resulted in a 13% increase in students passing the English and language arts portion of the statewide assessment, and an 18% increase in students passing the math portion. The executive budget proposes expanding this model statewide in fiscal year 2021. To accomplish this expansion, the executive budget includes $44 million to establish a grant program that can be used to support implementation of proven turnaround strategies. Schools that receive a D or F on the state letter grade system may opt into this program, as well as C-rated schools that have 60% or more free or reduced lunch. The executive estimates that 554 schools will qualify for this funding. Additionally, the pilot will include first priority in the Beat the Odds Leadership Academy, which provides professional development and leadership training to school officials. Results-based funding was introduced in fiscal 2018, and it was meant to reward schools for high student achievement and to incentivize the expansion and replication of high-performing schools. The original law distributed results-based funding using AZ merit scores in fiscal 2018. As the letter grade framework was being overhauled and refined, presuming that a transition to distributing results-based funding by letter grade beginning in fiscal year 2019 would occur. Despite the original intent, results-based funding has still been distributed using AZ merit scores in fiscal years 2019 and 2020, but the fiscal year 2021 budget moves to using the letter grade framework. Distributing results-based funding according to letter grade accomplishes 2 goals. First, using the top 2 percentile of AZ merit scores focuses solely on proficiency, while the letter grade system includes other measures of academic performance, such as academic growth and graduation rates. Second, using the top percentile of AZ merit means that if one school improves, another must necessarily drop off the top and lose that funding. Using the letter grade system ensures all qualifying schools can be recognizing for their results. Moving on to school capital. The School Facilities Board, or SFB, is mandated to ensure compliance with building adequacy standards and routine preventive maintenance guidelines for both new and existing buildings through the awarding of building renewal grants. Due to aging building systems, building renewal spending has increased in each of the last 2 years. As detailed by the yellow line on the graph, fiscal 2020 building renewal grant spending is projected to exceed the current appropriation of $80 million. As of December, SFB has already awarded 78% of the original fiscal 2020 appropriation. The executive budget commits to ensuring Arizona's school facilities are fully funded. The budget includes $35 million in supplemental funding for fiscal 2020 building renewal grants, bringing the total for fiscal 2020 appropriation to $115 million. It also includes a total of $108 million in funding for the fiscal 2021 building renewal grants. In addition to overseeing the maintenance of existing school facilities, SFB also administers state funds to school districts that require the construction of new schools. Each year, SFB determines if districts will meet demographic benchmarks and will necessitate new school construction. 2 new facilities have been approved for construction in fiscal 21, with a total base funding amount of $11.7 million. In keeping with the commitment to fully fund our Arizona schools, the executive budget includes an additional $6.4 million to increase the current square foot cost allocations for new school construction. Currently, the rate is at $180 per square foot. We are moving it to $287 per square foot in fiscal 21. The executive budget continues to invest in Arizona's future teachers and includes $1 million for the Arizona Teachers Academy to attract more potential teachers. Through the Teachers Academy, Arizona made a commitment to our aspiring teachers. If you stay and teach in Arizona, the state will ensure that your tuition is covered. Arizona Teachers Academy enrollment has skyrocketed, with over 2,000 students now participating since its establishment in 2018. In fact, Arizona has experienced the second highest growth in new teacher enrollment in teacher preparation programs. The yellow line on the left represents Arizona teacher prep program enrollment growth, and the blue line represents teacher prep program enrollment growth nationally. Arizona is one of only 5 states seeing an increase in enrollment. The executive budget includes targeted investment for community colleges to fully fund the science, technology, engineering, math, and workforce program aid formulas for the Maricopa, Pima, and Pinal Community College districts for the first time since its creation in 2013. The STEM and Workforce Program aid formula provides community college districts with funds to pursue STEM partnerships with businesses and educational institutions, fund additional faculty, purchase technology equipment, expand student career services, and address capital needs. In addition, the executive budget includes $6 million to expand education opportunities at 10 Arizona rural communities college districts for flexible operating fund and career and technical education programs. Further, the executive budget provides $4 million to the Arizona Commerce Authority to expand the Arizona Advanced Technology Corridor to help enhance and accelerate workforce development in community colleges. I'm going to turn it over now to Alex, and he can talk a little bit about public safety.
Hi, I'm Alec Ulano. I'm an analyst at OSPB in charge of a handful of 9010 regulatory boards. Hey, Bill, how did you left click to progress the slide? Not working. Did you left click the slides?
Just roll it down.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
A cornerstone of the executive budget is a comprehensive investment into the Department of Corrections. The vast majority of that money will go towards 3 primary goals: increasing employee pay, repairing aged infrastructure, and funding additional educational programming opportunities for inmates. The three next slides will provide additional details on some of these investments. The executive budget provides $33 million to fund a multi-phase project that will close down the majority of the Florence Prison Complex, with the exception of the Globe unit, partner with county jail facilities and other third parties to house inmates, and move existing staff from Florence Prison to the Iman Prison Complex. As the table on the slide indicates, both prisons face problematic correctional officer 2 vacancy rates that make achieving safe, desired staffing levels difficult, and sometimes even impossible. The closure of the Florence Prison, which is past the point of repair, will save the state an estimated $150 to $400 million. The executive budget supports an ongoing $8.1 million appropriation from the Medical Marijuana Fund to improve the provision of substance abuse treatment to services and inmates. The plan funds a significant expansion of substance abuse counseling at the Department of Corrections and is projected to allow an additional 2,000 inmates to complete substance abuse counseling annually. Additionally, this funding will establish a medical loan repayment plan at the Department of Health Services to provide loan repayment reimbursements to individuals providing substance abuse counseling in correctional environments. This funding will also be utilized to hire additional employment specialists and to fund an Access Reach In program to provide additional resources and treatment to inmates convicted of drug possession as they transition back into society. Over the past 10 years, driving under the influence incidents have increased 156%, over 5 times the increase in vehicle registrations over that same time period. In order to save lives and prevent DUI and wrong-way driving incidents, the executive tackles this problem by 4 coordinated interagency investments at DPS, Liquor, Governor's Office of Highway Safety, and ADOT. The investments at DPS and Liquor will provide extra personnel to these agencies to detect, investigate, and prevent wrong-way and impaired driving. The additional staff at Liquor will be used to liaise with local law enforcement in investigating deaths and severe accidents involving alcohol where liquor licensed establishments appear to be a factor. At DPS, 6 additional night watch troopers will patrol Maricopa County from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. when most of these incidents occur. Additional grant funding will be provided over the next 3 years to local law enforcement via the Governor's Office of Highway Safety to conduct additional traffic stops. And ADOT will be making technological investments in thermal cameras to better detect and respond to wrong-way drivers at night. The executive budget provides a comprehensive life cycle replacement plan for DPS's vehicles and helicopters to bring this critical life-saving equipment into industry standards and compliance. This plan involves purchasing 2 helicopters for DPS in fiscal year 21. One will be lease purchased and the other will be bought outright. And lease purchasing for a helicopter every 2 years afterward. For vehicles, this plan requires the department to lease purchase 1/6 of its total vehicle fleet each year for 6 years. This will step up gradually for a full cost of $19.8 million at the end of the 6-year phase-in. DPS owns, operates, and maintains a statewide microwave network that provides critical public safety radio communications for 12 state agencies, over 12,000 users, and a number of local, federal, and tribal agencies. The microwave infrastructure has been aging and not supported by the industry for the past 20 years. These upgrades will modernize DPS's radio system and will provide a peace of mind to first responders, ensuring that 99.999% reliability, a maximum downtime of 5 minutes in any 12-month period. The budget includes a $1.2 million supplemental in fiscal year 2019 to start site permitting work on this project, and plans to have these critical updates completed at the end of fiscal year 2023. The appropriation is advance appropriated and lapses after 2 years, similar to other capital projects. In order to ensure the safety, efficiency, and transparency of DPS's troopers and sworn personnel, the executive budget provides a comprehensive body camera plan to equip every sworn member and DPS task force member with their own body camera. This funding provides for all the back-end equipment, software, and data storage associated with the cameras, as well for the 20 staffs responsible for video management and redaction services. Highlighted here are other major targeted investments at the Department of Public Safety. The executive provides $6 million to fund the construction of a district office for coverage on the new portion of the Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway. Notably, $2.9 million is used to fully fund the department's overtime expenses across all divisions, including accrued compensation time to alleviate staffing shortage problems caused by using vacancy savings and adjusting out trooper schedules to fund overtime. This overtime investment could hire up to 11 troopers from reallocated vacancy savings. The executive also invests in a regular equipment replacement cycle for agency computers and for increased expenses at the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center and the Crime Lab. This also funds the replacement of the worst remote housing units, maintains last year's investment in AZ Post, and provides life-saving rifle-resistant equipment to all sworn personnel. Next will be speaking is Zach Harris.
I'm Zach Harris, budget analyst for OSBB. I'm over ADOT, Commerce Authority, and Secretary of State. The executive budget exhibits the hallmarks of responsible government by driving efficiencies, expanding opportunities for business, and enhancing and securing public assets. The state of Arizona owns and operates close to 6,000 facilities to serve Arizonans. Each year, the executive evaluates needs for repairs or upgrades, as well as opportunities to improvement government services through new construction. The executive budget includes $275 million for capital projects and building renewal. With this funding, the state can enhance transportation infrastructure, construct a new facility for state troopers patrolling the Loop 202, replace crumbling public safety housing units in remote areas, and repair dams and fish hatcheries throughout the state. Arizona is a great place to do business, as shown by the economic growth described earlier. With a targeted investment in technology, it will get even better. The executive budget includes $8 million to develop a business one-stop system, which will streamline interactions with state agencies, making it easier to start and expand businesses in Arizona. This online portal will provide users with a centralized location to submit information, track and review progress, and receive approvals to do business. System design is already underway, and with this funding, the first phase will be launched in fiscal year 21. Investments in cybersecurity in recent years have focused on prevention, with efforts to strengthen frontline defenses. In the FY21 executive budget invests $12 million to enhance the state's ability to respond and recover if an incident were to occur. In the immediate aftermath of an incident, a rapid response is critical. The executive budget expands the Arizona National Guard Cyber Task Force, which can deploy in an emergency to isolate the threat, prevent further damage, and begin system restoration. In addition to this response capability, this versatile group of highly trained soldiers and airmen can strengthen the state's cyber defense by conducting vulnerable assessments and penetration testing. Catastrophic data breaches, although rare, can result in extensive financial losses and system downtime. Currently, the state has limited resources to recover from major incidents. The executive budget includes funding to develop a statewide cybersecurity risk management program to mitigate losses. These initiatives will strengthen the state's cybersecurity resilience, allowing for a faster and stronger recovery. Increasing access to advanced telecommunications is key to strengthening public safety, expanding healthcare services, and bolstering economic development throughout the state. The executive approaches this in two ways. First, by creating smart highway corridors, and second, by bolstering the Rural Broadband Grant Program. The Smart Highway Corridor Initiative includes laying 514 miles of fiber optics and installing multiple smart highway technologies across 3 strategic corridors. These corridors include the entire length of I-40 and I-19, as well as I-17 from Flagstaff to Sunset Point, which connects to fiber already being installed between Anthem and Sunset Point. This infrastructure opens the door for providing future broadband capacity for smart infrastructure projects in Arizona's rural and tribal areas. Additionally, the executive budget includes funding to bolster the recently established Rural Broadband Grant Program. This funding will be split between supporting broadband infrastructure development and supporting community broadband planning. In addition to investing in Arizona's advanced telecommunication infrastructure, the executive budget also focuses on the vital transportation corridor that connects Phoenix and Tucson. A portion of Interstate 10 between Phoenix and Tucson is an essential transportation and commerce corridor for the state, and widening it to 6 lanes will improve public safety and enhance economic development opportunities in central Arizona and the Gila River Indian community. The executive recognizes this and takes the first step by including $28 million, along with $50 million being reprogrammed from the Arizona Department of Transportation's 5-year program for a new 6-lane bridge that replaces the current 60-year-old Gila River Bridge. This replacement will ultimately allow for the acceleration of future improvements to the I-10 corridor that connects Phoenix and Tucson. Today, the 1,500 residents of Tonto Basin must drive across the creek bed to get from one side of its community to the other. High waters often inhibit residents from crossing, and the governor recognizes the need for a new bridge to connect both sides. The governor has called upon the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation to fund the $20 million bridge that will improve safety, quality of life, and economic opportunity for the community. In addition, the governor has instructed the Arizona Department of Transportation to assist Gila County in its application. The department has already begun reviewing the engineering details to help ensure that this project gets done. Last year, the governor led efforts to pass the Drought Contingency Plan, the most significant water policy in 40 years. However, we shouldn't protect our environment one resource at a time. Therefore, the FY21 executive budget takes a holistic approach in protecting our air, land, and water. In 2015, the United States Environmental Protection Agency raised the national ambient air quality standard for ground-level ozone. Arizona's unique geography and weather patterns make it difficult to meet this new level of attainment. As can be seen in this chart, the Phoenix area had a significant number of days over the standard in 2019. Without improvement, Arizona faces future penalties from the federal government that would negatively impact the economic growth in the state. To address this, the executive budget includes funding for a travel reduction public awareness campaign and funding to implement the remote testing pilot program authorized last year. In addition to protecting our air quality, the executive is committed to protecting our land and water. The Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund Program, commonly known as WARF, is Arizona's alternative to the United States Environmental Protection Agency approach to remediation of contaminated hazardous waste sites. Through WARF, the state maintains control of determining the financial and other responsibility for state site remediation. 6 years ago, the program had only closed one contaminated site since its inception in 1986, as this chart illustrates. The number of sites removed from WARF registry has now grown to 6. To continue this accelerated progress, the executive budget includes fully funding for WARF as statutorily required. WARF has not been fully funded as authorized by statute since FY 2007. With warmer climates and federal forests that have not been adequately maintained, Arizona faces a larger number of fires at a higher per acre cost. To address this more dangerous environment, the executive budget repays all outstanding cost share fire bills that the state owes federal partners from abnormally high concentration of prior year fires on state land, increases the general fund deposit into the fire suppression fund to reflect the higher costs associated with recent increases in multi-jurisdictional fires, and raises firefighter pay at the Department of Forestry and Fire Management by 5% in recognition of longer wildfire seasons and increased work hours and safety risk of the state firefighters.
The state's fundamental fundamental purposes include providing critical services and support for Arizona's most needy and vulnerable citizens. The executive budget helps vulnerable Arizonans with an emphasis on children who are in foster care or victims of abuse. In fiscal 21, the executive budget includes $23 million to expand access to quality child care for working and foster families by providing incentive bonuses to quality child care facilities, specifically the suspension of the waiting list for child care and providing up to $200 for foster families to cover the one-time cost of child care enrollment fees. In addition, the executive budget continues to make good on the commitment to increase the number of children in loving forever families. The executive budget includes $14 million in funding for new adoptions. On top of the funding baseline caseload growth, the budget includes a one-time incentive of $5,000 per child to encourage the adoption of sibling groups, and more than doubles the adoption rate, subsidy rate for children with significant developmental disabilities to ensure that all children are in loving homes. Building on last year's 5% Department of Child Safety caseworker pay increase, the executive budget includes $11 million for a 10% pay increase for caseworkers and its staff to get caseworker pay closer to market rates compared to neighboring states. In fiscal 21, the executive budget continues to support kinship families by doubling the grandmother stipend to $150 per month to promote lifelong family connections and lessen the disruption of removal. In an effort to strengthen Arizona's newborn screening program, the executive budget works to close the structural deficit in the newborn screening fund by combining the cost of its two existing screens and increasing the total screening fee from $101 to $113. This will allow 2 new tests to be added for all Arizona newborns to detect muscular and neurological disorders early on. The executive budget includes funding for a dependency alternative program in 13 rural counties to help families and children involved in dependency petitions. Pima County's program had an impressive success between 2015 and 2018, in which more than 300 children were kept out of the foster care system due to participation in the program. The executive budget expands this program as a 3-year pilot to help keep more children and families together. The executive budget is dedicated to addressing the ongoing opioid crisis in Arizona. As part of the Opioid Action Plan in January 2018, $10 million from the general fund provided services to Arizonans struggling with substance abuse. Between February 2018 and September 2019, the funding provided over 43,000 services, including copay support, doctor visits, lab tests, and methadone administration to over 23,000 Arizonans. This funding will be completely expended by the end of fiscal year 2020 to continue support for uninsured and underinsured Arizonans in need of substance abuse. The executive budget supports a $6 million deposit from the Medical Marijuana Fund to reach an additional 18,000 Arizonans in fiscal 21. The executive budget also addresses the pressing concern of rising suicide rates. In 2017, suicide was the 8th leading cause of death in the state of Arizona. The executive prioritizes a suicide prevention plan that includes $400,000 for the creation of a suicide mortality review team in fiscal 21. The team will track suicide-related deaths statewide to identify suicide and self-harm hotspots, to detect gaps in reporting to inform policy change that reduces suicide mortality rate among target populations. The initiative is part of a larger suicide prevention strategy that includes enhancing crisis response teams, expanding crisis resource services, and a social isolation campaign to reach to reach at-risk populations. To highlight the natural beauty and diversity of the state of Arizona, the executive budget includes $1 million to expand various statewide destination marketing initiatives. These include the Rural and Tribal Marketing Cooperative Match Program, which would allow at least 4 more rural and tribal communities to purchase marketing options, a Leave No Trace campaign to minimize visitor impact on the environment and educate tourists about sustainable practices while visiting Arizona destinations, a marketing initiative to highlight new direct flights from Denver to Flagstaff and Prescott, and the promotion of Arizona as a travel destination in national consumer trade shows and travel exhibits in Chicago, Dallas, Minneapolis, New York, and San Francisco. Finally, the executive is committed to providing services to veterans, which is why the fiscal 2021 executive budget includes funding for 6 new veteran benefit counselors. These counselors help veterans request for military service records, upgrade military discharges, apply for special veteran license plates, provide information on general state benefits, and assist with other questions about veteran benefits and entitlements. Counselors currently bring in $600 million in federal benefits each year. The additional positions are estimated to bring in an additional $120 million. The Arizona Department of Veteran Services plans to place the new counselors in Quartzsite, Anthem, Tuba City, Davis-Monthan, Holbrook, and Chinle. The new counselors will increase veterans' accessibility to counseling and bring in more federal benefits to veterans in those areas. So, summary. This is the balance sheet portion. What you see is that in fiscal 20, after all is said and done, there's an ending balance of $671 million and a structural balance of $762 million. Structural balance is defined as ongoing spending compared to ongoing revenues. In fiscal 21, it's $164 million and $250 million. $250 million, when you think of a $12 billion budget, isn't very much, but it's way better than we've been doing in many years. So it's a step in the right direction. These policies, a framework the governor calls the American Way, deeply reflects the commitment to remain as a place to come for a new life, a fresh start, full of opportunities, and it takes a government that promotes economic prosperity and uses tax dollars responsibly, not to fund a bigger government, but to help Arizonans keep more of what they can for their families and futures. So, questions? I'll give you a hint. This is the staff at our office. If I can't answer it, they will. Go ahead.
Like the budget for education in your slide, like the largest veterans, economy versus safety, everything else. I just want to know why Governor Ducey has education. I mean, $6 45 versus the economy, $1 million. $28 million. Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, $9 million. Public safety, welfare, and health. I mean, it's just huge compared to all the other things.
Yes, and that's what he wanted to do.
And the other thing is there any funding that's going to state, or any funding that is going towards, or any funding that is going towards school children?
A lot of it gets funded indirectly that way. like additional assistance, we're moving it up 2 years, but it's both for districts and for charter additional assistance. And every time we make changes to the school funding formula, for whatever reason, the charters are built into the formula. So there's nothing that's spotlighted where we said, okay, this money goes straight to charters or to private schools.
My background, my husband was rating. Formula for having an excellent best technology, it is have probably about 7. And that's one of 2 in Mohave County that got an A rating. And you can verify that with my file, I have this here. But that's the important.
Okay. I'll take the message back. Other questions?
The finance department. Is there needs to other students or do you?
I don't have a list of where they're going. I can give you an idea on how we're going to decide. The last time we tried to do something where we were trying to decide whether to put inmates in private prisons or in other facilities, we allowed counties to be participants in the RFP. That's what we did last time. No county bid. And this isn't the first time we've tried to put state inmates in county jails. I'll tell you what the usual process is, and then I'll tell you that we're trying to do something better than that this time. But usually what happens is, when things are going well, people from the county boards are always saying, but we have these empty jails, you can use our beds. And usually when it comes down to we have to go find these beds and provide the services, the sheriffs are always saying, we can't do that. So I think somewhere along the way we're going to have to discuss, what it is the counties can do and how the best way is to use them. The prisons don't have many choices on the services they provide. Almost everything the Department of Corrections does is the result of a federal lawsuit on the conditions of confinement and what services are required. If you're going to take somebody's freedom away, you have to do at least X. And that becomes a problem. For the most part, most jails are built secure enough so that that's not an issue. It's usually the other stuff. It's not a new problem. There's a good chance that there is some capacity in other prisons throughout the state, not a lot, but there's some. And between that and the jails, there's a good chance we won't be able to actually house all of the inmates that we need to. We might need to put some in private facilities temporarily while we figure out, the rest of this puzzle. The staff is actually one of the good things about this. The plan is, right now, the Department of Corrections has real serious problems with staff shortages. So by simply, moving inmates out of the Florence facility, a good share of that staff can go down a couple miles down the road to Iman, and they'll have a position there for them. Or maybe they decide they want to be somewhere else. They want to go to Lewis or Tucson or something, or who knows. So that part will work out okay, but housing the inmates is the big hurdle. The problem with Florence is right now it's just somewhere under $1 billion in deferred maintenance that's left well, we could probably make it usable if we spent a couple $100 million, but it's a really old place. Yeah. I can remember days when one of the units was operating on a temporary generator about the size of half of this room. A generator operating a whole piece of prison. It's a very old facility and needs work. So, the construction people told us the most economical would be bulldoze and start over. So we have to figure out how to do that. And if we can solve the staffing shortage while we do it, that's the goal. Yeah.
This 10% increase for caseworkers.
It was really focused on specific groups. It was part of where are the biggest turnover problems, which are like in the case of public safety, it's not hard to envision why 20% vacancy at corrections is bad. The corrections plan, for the most part, is a continuation of what we funded last year. Last year we funded about 2/3 of it, and this year we're just topping it up to make sure it's complete. Yeah, I don't think this is going to go away. Pay packages for public safety is probably going to be around for a while. Yeah, and I don't know what to tell you on everybody else that works for the state. Other questions? Sure.